11:58, and we were looking at noon. But we're all here. The gang is all here at the Lo and Behold Comedy Think Tank. The gang is all here.
Yay for us.
With our special guest. Would you like to introduce our special guest, Joan?
I'm gonna start it all. It's not live and it's not Saturday night, but it's
We are live, honey. We are live.
We're live, and it's not Saturday night, but it is, lo and behold, here in the think tank, where critical thinking is rewarded and common sense sometimes goes overboard. We read that it's a very good year for ripe bananas, edibles, and guns. We were told toilet paper might be in demand, so 14 million of us fantasized a threat to their ass, went out and bought guns to protect the toilet paper. Now, lo and behold, they're asking, do Americans have a fantasy problem? We built this country on a fantasy, dreamed that gold was buried in vacant lots, and according to some white people, all the lots were vacant. This was not a little house on the prairie. This was a million little houses on the prairie, each one with a fantasy to lock up trespassers. Normally in this country, we have about 2 million, mostly not white prisoners locked up. The think tank is now thinking, we're not going back to normal. Normal is obsolete racism. It's a false equivalency, not black versus white, it's black versus racism. Do I see Saturn coming up on the horizon with rings? That's not Saturn, is that Venus? No, that's Rhonda. And that's Rhonda with a super guest, my North Star, and one of my favorite sons. Rhonda, yes. Who do you got?
The author, writer, actor, director, Jared Reinmuth, and I'm holding up his book that I was fortunate enough to get when he had a signing at the Strand bookstore. But I left before you could sign it, so you have to promise me that when health protocols will permit, you'll sign my book.
Absolutely, I promise. Thank you. And I remember seeing you there that night and looking out at you, and it was a great night. The last days of disco.
Would you just tell us a little bit about your book and how it relates to the topic of addiction to incarceration?
Of course. So this is, of course, the story of Frank Big Black Smith, who was the head of the prison security for the prisoners during the Attica Rebellion of 1971, which ended in a massacre perpetrated by the governor of New York at the time, Rockefeller, in collaboration with President Nixon. And just to bring it right to it and not get all in the history of Attica, but to say that at the time, the prisoners, as they articulated their demands and as they articulated grievances, they articulated it with the language of abolition. They saw the prison as a plantation. They called it the warden's plantation, where they were forced to work for sometimes 30 cents a day in horrible conditions, and it was about dignity. And they used the language of a slave rebellion. That's exactly how they articulated it. They already at that time were discussing mass incarceration as just an extension of the plantation system. And that was how they articulated it themselves. And you see it in all of their demands, writings, and personal papers. Of course, so many great prison writers. And now Frank Smith is, takes his place amongst them.
What you said, it has struck me so much, how important language is around a person's survival, and using the terminology from slavery in connection with incarceration, I feel is not far off at all. It's almost completely on point. because it seems geared towards targeting the descendants of slavery in America. And it is actually, and it always surprises me when people act like they don't know even that our system of policing is an extension of slave capturing.
patrols. Yeah.
Capturing, punishing, and sometimes even killing,
intimidating and terrorizing
runaway slaves or rebellious slaves.
Absolutely.
And Joan's idea about her question, are we addicted to incarceration, is so fascinating to me. What do you think about that, Jared?
Well, I think that I sort of began learning how to articulate these issues for myself by obviously reading a lot of Dr. Angela Davis, and she's the one that even articulates it, that there is an unbroken line from slavery through Jim Crow, lynching, and now to mass incarceration, that there's an unbroken line.
I agree with that, but also the other way, we have the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah.
So it's going both ways, actually.
Yeah. And then it feeds on itself in a downward death spiral because it wreaks such economic havoc, health havoc.
Right now, there is COVID is raging through prisons, and there's so many difficulties around tamping it down within that system.
Right on. Yeah, right on. It's horrible, and it's making everyone take a better look at this epidemic that we've been in for the last 50 years of mass incarceration. Our stepdad, Dan, of course, who was the inspiration for the book and wrote the brilliant introduction to it, he tells the story of
I would like for you to mention just his association with the defense team of those.
Yes. So he was, of course, a member of the Attica legal defense team.
That's Dan Myers.
Dan Myers from the beginning. And when he was filing the original lawsuit, the original class action lawsuit in 1974, paraphrasing the number, but about 250,000 prisoners. And again, as we said, this is already at a point where they're articulating mass incarceration as an epidemic, as a scourge on poor communities, and of course, mostly that is people of color. And when he was then going around to deal with the settlement and have prisoners sign on to the settlement, there were now over 2 million prisoners.
Wow.
So if you think about back then, them realizing and having political conscience and theory and thought about what was going on, people like George Jackson, L.B. Barkley.
Taking into consideration all the laws that were passed that incentivized arresting Black people and giving money to jails. Well, this was going to be short and sweet, and it absolutely has been very enlightening. And I want people to be aware of your book and look for it online. And where else can they get it, Jared?
They can get it in bookstores everywhere, it seems, and comic book stores. Support your local comics, support your local businesses. But if you want to go online, of course, all the big sellers have it too.
Great, and thank you so much for coming to the Comedy Think Tank.
Well, and thank you, lo and behold, for bringing me in.
Yes,
it's a great honor.
It is a pleasure to have you, and I'm delighted for everyone who is catching the Lo and Behold Comedy Think Tank. Come back anytime, subscribe, and follow Lo and Behold Comedy on Facebook, and go to our website and show us some love. Joan Reinmuth and Rhonda Handsome are Lo and Behold.
Happy New Year, everyone. Love you guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jared. Thank you.
darling.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Pleasure.
So, Joan, do you think we have that for?
I think it's in the can.
Okay, great.
Right.